Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, guys. Celtic Warband here, and welcome back to another one of my historical battles in my historical battle series. In today's battle, we will of course be looking at the Battle of Agincourt. This was one of the crucial battles fought between England and France in the 100 Years' War. However, this battle is preceded, as we've seen from the introduction, by a 25-year tentative peace. However, when Henry V came to the throne, he felt the need to quickly legitimize his rule. This was because his father had actually usurped the kingdom, and the English nobility were divided on who would rightfully sit on the throne of England. And what better way to legitimize his reign than to gain glory and prestige on a military campaign in France? There was no better time to do this as well. As I've already stated, France was not a united nation at this point. The King of France was not only weak, but he was quite literally insane. He actually believed himself to be made of glass and went so far as to have iron rods sewn into his clothing to protect himself from shattering. So, yeah, really an insane guy. With all of this well known throughout the kingdom, one could understand why the nobility felt they did not answer to a king such as this. Instead, they squabbled and fought amongst themselves for land, and when Henry V actually landed in late autumn of 1415 to siege Harfleur, there was no French army to relieve them, and that's because the nobility just could not come to terms. By the time an army was put together to block Henry's retreat at Calais, it was still divided in every way except for their hatred of the English. Now, you can see that the English over here have chosen their position well. As you can see, Henry has formed up his 1,000 men-at-arms in the front lines. Oh, I went a little too far here. Sorry about that. Now, for this recreation, we did have to use billmen to represent the sharpened stakes that were deployed to slow the French cavalry charge. But behind that, we have the men-at-arms, and then Henry had 6,000 of his English longbowmen. Now, looking over at the French side, it did consist predominantly of heavy infantry and cavalry. There were some crossbowmen that were present in this battle. However, the English just had superior range and positioning, so the crossbows were kind of rendered useless in this battle. So many crossbowmen actually abandoned their crossbows and attached themselves to infantry units and just charged into melee. But as you can see, we have the first few lines of the French army, and they did consist of all heavy cavalry. In fact, much of the nobility placed themselves in the front lines. The reason being is that they wanted the glory of beating the English to be theirs and not to fall to the infantry, or as they put it, the common man. But there were a few things that the French hadn't really accounted for. The battlefield here, we searched for quite some time to try and find an appropriate battlefield. You can see the English are formed up in this valley with some hills and forests on either side. This represents impassable terrain to the cavalry, so they would have had to charge straight down the middle of the valley. And this was actually a massive farmer's field, so you can see we've represented that. We do have some farms on the in the valley here, but basically all of this was a muddy swampland. The reason being is that it was a farmer's field that had just been recently plowed, and then they had a huge torrential downpour of rain the night before. So this made it an absolute mud bath, and it would have made it very difficult for the heavily armored French units to move forwards across and make it to the English. It really slowed them down. You can see that I've represented that by actually walking my cavalry instead of running them forwards. The other thing they didn't account for was, again, those English longbowmen. A trained English longbowman at that time could easily fire about 10 arrows per minute. So couple that with the slow movement through the muddy fields, and the French were in for a pretty nasty surprise. So I hope that paints the picture for you guys as well as I can. You can see that we do have the dismounted Henry V here on foot, kind of moving back and forth behind his lines, encouraging his warriors. I do have a little disclaimer for you guys. This will get quite laggy towards the end of the battle, because we're going to have about 20,000 units in one very thin line. So I'm going to utilize slow motion and also zoom-ins early on in the battle, but once we get the infantry moving in and we've kind of got them piling up here trying to force through the English, we're actually going to have to just take a more overview look of the battlefield. But here we go. Let's go ahead and slow this down. We can already see that we have the English longbowmen firing on the French heavy cavalry. And remember, these guys are not just basic knights. This is a lot of the French nobility of the period. Dukes, lords, counts, even some princes, and of course, as I said, dukes of like Brabant, I believe, were involved. A lot of French nobility, but here we go. Charging in, and there we go on the sharpened stakes as well. All of the French cavalry getting really slowed down by those stakes planted by the archers. So very good start to the battle for Henry V, just slowing that French charge to a standstill and protecting a lot of his men-at-arms in the front lines. This also allows the archers, who are not under any sort of threat right now, to begin firing at the second and third lines of the French cavalry moving in because, oh, sorry. Put it on play there. They did actually split it up into 3 separate cavalry charges. The first one was supposed to easily sweep away the men-at-arms, and then the second and third were meant to move in and then just basically wash aside those English archers, which really were not respectable in the French nobility's eyes. But there we go again, charging through onto those stakes. So the cavalry is very much in trouble, as you can see. They are really hampered by the forests on the left and right side as well, so they don't have the ability to get up onto the slopes to get after those archers, who now have a very commanding view of the battlefield, just firing into their flanks, as you can see. We also do have a few men-at-arms here as well, but let's just enjoy some of the volleys here. Oh, looks like they stopped their firing, but they will eventually shoot right over the hilltops there. So imagine how terrifying this would be for the third line of cavalry moving in here, seeing the first and second lines of nobility already breaking. And it's already getting a bit framey. It's not a very long battle, so we will probably do this more in slow motion. But I'm trying to create the battle as historically as possible, and there's only so much that I can do in an actual game. But yeah, once we'll get some good zoom-ins here of the French nobility in the front lines. They're trying to break through those sharpened stakes with the men-at-arms, fighting them on foot. Very nice battle lines here. I haven't really delved into the army comps because, as I said, this isn't really a regular battle. This is a historical battle, so we've already kind of gone through what the French and the English had as a whole. But I'll just quickly mention the people that were part of this battle. This is a battle I've actually had for quite some time, but I just haven't had time to get one of these historical battles done in probably over a year. I've just been really hampered for time. But the French players are myself, the Hunted, and Hamdog CDXX. And then we have Azrian Fox, who is playing as Henry V and the English. And look at this. Look at all of the cavalry routing from the battlefield here. The cowards. This was the nobility that thought that they would be able to break the English in a mere matter of minutes from the cavalry charge, and now they are breaking from the battlefield. And also imagine how terrifying that would be for the lines of infantry, or, quote, the common man, unquote, as they put it, moving in to support the cavalry and then realizing that they're actually breaking from the battlefield. So let's go ahead and put it back onto play there. But you can see that the Billmen are holding very strongly. We've also got Henry V over here. Again, just offering some support to his men, staying well away from the battlefield, because if he does die in the front lines, he probably will lose the battle at that point. His men will just break. The courage of the men is already kind of on a knife's edge at this point. They've been suffering from a massive campaign that only yielded them one port city. They've been marching for, I believe it was like 300-something miles, or 300-something kilometers, from Harfleur south over the River Somme and then towards Calais, suffering from dysentery the entire time. As I said, the English had already lost a third of their force, and only about 36 casualties were recorded as actually lost during the siege. The rest were all due to dysentery. So these guys are sick, they're exhausted, they're probably soaked from the night's rain before. So morale is kind of hanging, as I said, on the edge of a knife. But luckily, Henry V is a brilliant commander and also a brilliant speechmaker, and he has spurred his men on to hold in this very narrow valley. And the French did definitely outnumber the English. The French account, more modern accounts, it used to be that they said it, that the English had about 5,000 and the French had close to 30,000. But the more contemporary sources believe that the French probably had closer to about 15,000 men, and the English had, as I said, about 7,000. So they were outnumbered about 2 to 1 in this engagement. But again, suffering from, you know, probably lack of food, dysentery, disease, low morale. It was not an easy shot. Henry V actually believed that he would inevitably lose this battle. He was formed up basically because there was no other choice but to fight at this point. And look at the fighting here as the rebounds start to move in. The lightly common infantry of the French moving in to challenge the men-at-arms in melee. And you can just see the amount of cavalry that has died in this one small area here. You can just look down the line and all you can see is a massive pile of French nobility. And even behind the lines of the men-at-arms as well, you can see that some of them hitting the stakes with such force that they actually flew over top of the first line of men-at-arms. But we do have more units coming forwards, and the French do definitely have a lot more reserves. As you can see, there is quite a bit more that has not engaged. Unfortunately, though, most of the cavalry has broken from the battlefield at this point. We've got more of the rebouts coming in here. We've got 2 lines of the rebouts. We've got some late period sergeants, though, so we do have some pretty elite units on the battlefield in the final reserves. We've also got the dismounted chevalier here, heavy shock infantry, plate armor, ready to punch a hole through that weakened defense. And then, of course, more rebalds. We've got more sergeants and more dismounted chevalier. And we've got 3 of the commanders over here just overseeing the battlefield. But it was so chaotic over on this section that really there was not much that they could see from the positioning that they had there farther down the battlefield. Let's go ahead and put it back to play. But yeah, you can see it's already starting to chug here as we basically lost. If we take a look at the man count, I believe the man count was somewhat accurate here. Yeah, 14,400 to 5,200. So that's actually a pretty historical rendition of the numbers on the battlefield. But already about 3,000 of the French lives are right here in this very small line. So imagine adding another 11,000 French warriors into this one little choke point here. It's about to get quite framey. I couldn't even imagine being in a battle like this, though. Some of the crazy things, too. There's so much that... There's so much knowledge on the internet and in some books that I've been reading about Agincourt. And crazily enough, they said that the ground was actually so muddy and there were so many French packed into this one small area that some of the French knights actually got trampled into the mud, and they did not die actually in melee. They suffocated in the mud because their armor was so heavy that it just held them down into the mud and the mire, and then their comrades, thinking they were dead, just walked over top of them and thus suffocated them alive. Very, very gruesome. And as you can see, as the units are breaking, they're breaking right into the next lines of infantry that are moving in, scattering their formation and also probably lowering their morale quite a bit. If we take a look over here, you can see that we do have some units that are breaking through that formation, and not to mention those English longbows continually doing work on this battlefield here. Arrow after arrow after arrow being slung over top of this men-at-arms line and into the lines of units that are moving in. Let's go ahead and put this on slow motion. And you can see more and more of the French infantry just being packed on in. At this point, from a From like an officer's standpoint, I don't really know what the French were thinking at this point. Seeing all of their nobility get slaughtered on those stakes, not being able to break through with several thousand warriors, I just don't know why they continued to commit more and more units. And the French were kind of forced to attack at this point due to the nobility. They were actually waiting for another 9,000 reinforcements to come on in. There were a couple of counts and lords and dukes that were unaccounted for at the morning of this battle, so there were even more French expected to arrive. But again, we get into the issues with the loyalties of the different dukes and lords. They didn't really swear fealty to one general in particular, so it could be that those reinforcements were just never expected to arrive. But they even wanted more men to arrive to this battlefield to face the English, and I think that comes down to a bit of the fear that they had dealing with those English longbows in previous battles where the French had overwhelming numbers and lost. Especially about 80 to 100 years before this, we did have the Battle of Calais, where the English longbowmen again proved their worth and destroyed the French. The French nobility, again in that one, expecting to have just an overwhelming cavalry charge and break them from the battlefield, and it just was not the case. So I think the French really kind of were hesitant to move in, especially the high command. They were hesitant to move in and actually face the English on this morning. However, it was the nobility that got sick and tired of waiting and actually decided to begin the charge. And that kind of actually spurred on all of the other knights to line up and charge as well. And then at that point, the leading generals at Agincourt for France just had to commit the rest of their units. At that point, the die is cast. But there we go. We can see that the men-at-arms, the English men-at-arms, are moving in to support the men-at-arms near those stakes in melee. So a secondary line moving forwards, and the archers are expending as much of their ammunition as possible. Again, still more units coming in here. We've got the dismounted heavy chevalier here for the French moving on in. You can see, though, but that from running all the way across the battlefield here, look at this. A lot of the units are already in a tired state by the time they reach the English lines. And that's just due to the fact that this entire area was just a mud pit. So again, really trying to be historically accurate there by having the tired units moving in. You can see that these sergeants here are fresh. They just moved into melee to support their comrades. And even the billmen, the men-at-arms with the stakes, as we are representing them with, they're active. They're active and tired, so they're almost in the same state as fresh units from the French that are moving on in. Let's zoom out of the battlefield and kind of take a quick look at the overview here, so you can see how the English are formed up. We've got the archers over here on this cliff face that are firing down into the flanks. Same over here on this cliff face, firing down into the flanks of the French. And this is just a huge bottleneck at this point. You can see a lot of my units in particular are wavering, being the first ones to move in. And look at the balance of power slipping quite heavily away from us. It's almost even at this point. And actually, the man count is almost even as well. It looks like the English have lost about 400 men, and the French have lost 50% of their force. Already 7,000 Frenchmen lay dead on this battlefield. Absolutely disgusting. But there you go. You can see that we are starting to get quite framey here. Let's go ahead and try and get some more slow motion. So forgive me as I quickly zoom down, and then we'll try and just pocket a couple of small areas of fighting here so you guys can enjoy the Battle of Agincourt. Some of the Rebaud's being slain in the front lines there, and yet you can see the archers still firing down onto the huge blobs of French warriors. It's almost like shooting fish in a barrel at this point. You cannot miss. Just fire in the general direction and you will probably hit a Frenchman. And apologies if there is pretty constant commentary, guys, but as I said, I've had this battle for quite a while, and I'm just so excited to bring it to you guys now. And there's been quite a lot that I have learned just researching Agincourt just for this battle, basically, because I try to make them as historical and as accurate as possible. And I just want to impart all of this really cool information. For all you history buffs out there, you will definitely understand. Let's jump out of there and see if we can just pan over here. Look at the amount of men over here. Insane. And we're having a little bit of a shadow glitch there. Let's try and zoom out a bit and then zoom back in. Yep, there's the French already starting to break from the battlefield. Some of the rebods in the front lines shaken. They are out of here. And look at the massive blob of the French, and then look at the thin line of English men-at-arms. Remember that Henry V only had about 1,000 men-at-arms. That's all he had. If we were taking into account the French, who had, I believe it was about 7,000 to 8,000 men-at-arms or heavy infantry. So that's a 7-to-1 ratio of infantry. Crazy, crazy, crazy. But again, those 6,000 longbowmen definitely evening the score there. Oh, more French warriors starting to break from the battlefield over there. You can see them moving in. We do actually have some of the generals that have moved in as well. If we pan over here, you can see that some of the remaining nobles here actually decided to dismount and fight on foot. And there we go. We've got the English archers up on the hilltops there, just moving into a more superior position to fire into their backs. I believe that I have also dismounted my general, and I'm charging him in. You can see the cavalry is left here. And I believe the third general as well, moving into melee over on this flank. In fact, there he goes right now, pushing into the front lines. Very, very cool. Let's go ahead and zoom on out here. Very, very slowly. But yeah, what a magnificent battlefield here. Let's go ahead and put it back onto play. Again, take a look at that man count. It's such a quick battle. It's probably one of the fastest battles with the most amount of death that I've ever had the privilege of uploading to my channel. And look at that. You can see that the balance of power actually moving away from us. Just look at that man count counter just going down for the French. 27, 23, 20, 19, 15, 13, 11, 8. You can barely keep up with it. It's crazy. And here we go. This is the point now where the English have actually expended most of their ammunition. And now that the French are completely committed in this bottleneck, the English longbowmen that were up on the hilltops, you can see over here as well, it's the same story, have actually just abandoned their bows and have drawn axes, swords, clubs, knives, whatever they had, and they charged down the slopes and basically engulfed the remainder of the French forces and have completely surrounded them. You can see all of the cavalry beginning to run away as well. Just a sombering feeling here to see all of the cavalry here with no nobility on it whatsoever. No nobles left alive in this battle. And of course, we do have Henry V over here as well. I could try and actually zoom into his point of view here. Yeah, there it is, really framey. But we'll try and see how he's going to do. Let's just stay in close and maybe, if we can, try and zoom in here as he's moving in. More, the flag is in the way. There we go. More French actually retreating there. Let's zoom out. Of course, the morale shock must have been pretty heavy, seeing the English effectively surrounding them in this small valley. Look at all the units that have just chain routed there. You can see a lot more units that are actually starting to waver. Our generals are in the front lines, popping our rally abilities just to try and keep our men in the fight. Of course, we do have our elite infantry in here now, the dismounted chevalier. They are supporting the general's bodyguard in melee. But even the men-at-arms that were originally in the battle are still holding strong. And look at some of the kills on these guys. Over 500 kills from these two ones in the center. 455 there. 485. 407. 580 over here. What about the ones that are more in the trees here? 478. And 436, so just thousands of kills by that first line of men-at-arms, and even the sergeants that were pushed in later on, they're starting to rack up some kills as well, although it's starting to look a little soft in the center. Some of the sergeants here not really having the best of luck fighting my general and my heavy infantry. Let's go ahead and try and zoom in once again 5 minutes left on the battle timer. Again, sorry, I know you guys probably want to hear these sounds, but it's just such a laggy battle that we kind of have to just enjoy it in slow motion there. Hold, men, hold. Hold, brave English. Just such a thin line of men there. Maybe 4 or 5 ranks deep. And all of the French beginning to waver. Some of them actually losing their heads there as they retreat. And we've looks like we've got an Englishman here behind the lines. That's pretty cool. See if he can actually get some kills. The great red cross there. Oh, yeah, we've got a couple of Englishmen, actually, that have moved over. Again, trying to surround them. Allies beginning to flee there. Oh, yes, there we go. Yes, so we're starting to see the English blocking the retreating Frenchmen. It was pretty insane as well. One of the reports actually said that Henry V captured almost 2,000 French prisoners, and he had all of them executed. There we go, some of the English slaughtering the Frenchmen as they do try to escape the battlefield. Not today, my friend, not today. Yeah, just push it over. There you go. There you go. Look at all the English that are now surrounding the French, just pushing them in here. Surprised the French even still have the stomach to fight. Let's zoom on out. Again, take stock. Such a cool screenshot as well of the battlefield, this long, thin line. It reminds me of the historical battle I did in Thrones of Britannia. The Battle of Hastings with the Norman Knights charging up the hill, and again, the Wessex general there just holding up on that hilltop. It's very similar, a very similar strategy, except this time the English are holding in a valley, and the French are charging into it. Let's go ahead and zoom out and see what we have. Balance of power heavily against the French now. The English outnumber them by about 1,000 men. And just look at that kill counter going down. Huge chain route over here. Basically, only the nobility here is left standing on this flank. Pretty much same thing on the other side as well. And then in the center, all I have left is my general remaining on the battlefield. Can try and zoom in here with it on regular play. We'll see if we can get a little bit of fighting. There we go. Not too bad. It is a bit framey, but I love to hear those battle sounds. Just imagine, guys, if you will, the screams of terror and agony that echoed across this battlefield. It must have just been insane. I couldn't even imagine just the brutality. And I believe my general should actually be somewhere close to here, if I'm not mistaken. You can see we do have the heavy French knights there in the front lines. If we zoom on down, let's look at the battle line. Really starting to thin out there for the French. Let's actually see if we can find my general here. If we just put this on slow motion. Okay, so he's actually over here. Ooh, frame. Okay, so he should be somewhere in the center here. Let's see. He's gonna have a gold helmet on. Of course, this in the game is the king, but of course the king isn't represented on the battlefield. As I said, he is quite insane and really doesn't have the respect of the nobility, so he was not on the battlefield at this time. Where are you, though? You must be somewhere. He's surrounded by the English, for sure. But I'm not sure where he is, unfortunately. He is somewhere in this general area, though. I keep thinking it's that one, but he would have a full gold helmet. He might actually be more over here, separated from his unit. Could very well be. But now even the great heavy plate armored chevalier here are starting to struggle. Oh, well, there we go, actually. Some retribution there. French actually knocking down that British swordsman. Looks like he's still alive, though. He may actually get up. Oh, we got a duel here. Come on. Heavily armored plated knight versus the lightly armored English sergeant. Or the man-at-arms, I should say. Oh, there we go. We've actually got another duel moving in. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful battle. Let's zoom on out once again. Take stock of the aftermath of this battle. Got 2 minutes and 50 seconds remaining. They're down to 2,000, basically under 2,000 men. And the English losing about 1,500, if my maths don't fail me. Let's go ahead and put this back onto play. But yes, you can just see the amount of dead that didn't even make it to the battle lines. This is all down to the English longbowmen, slaughtering all these units before they even made it to the battle line. Absolutely insane. As I said, every single longbowman shooting 10 arrows per minute. So that's 6,000 arrows per minute. No, apologies. 6,000, so that'd be 10 times 10? I don't know. Oh, gosh, that's so many arrows coming down this small valley. Because if everyone was shooting 10 arrows per minute and there was 6,000 on the battlefield, wouldn't that mean that there was 60,000 arrows? For some of you math whizzes, go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I'm pretty sure 6,000 times 10 is 60,000. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. But that is pretty much the end of the battle, guys. As you can see, the nobility is starting to waver on the flanks, and basically only my general remains in the center, so I'm going to go ahead and put this onto slow motion and zoom down and end this battle. Such an epic battle Agincourt is. I don't know why I spoke like Yoda there, but just just roll with it, guys. Oh, thank you so much for watching. Just like that, the last few units of infantry being routed from the battlefield, and Henry V secures an unbelievable victory. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this historical recreation. The French would not recover from this battle for quite some time, and it would pave the way for more English conquests in the future.